Hi. Hi. Hey, how's it going? How are you? I missed you. What's up? How was that last episode? Was it weird? Do you want to buy my stuff? Just kidding. How am I? How am I? How am I fucking doing? I feel weird and uncomfortable all the time. How are you? I'm nervous about this big move that I'm about to make. I've sort of been displaced for the last 6 months. I haven't really had a permanent home. I've been traveling and crashing at friends' places and sleeping on top of the covers of my bed at this Airbnb that my grandparents happen to own in probably the nicest part of the city. But I don't feel home, I don't really have this sense of settledness, and I'm about to have that feeling, but it's weird. It's like when you know something good is coming, it almost makes you more nervous because you're like, is this going to be as good as I hope it is? Or is this going to feel worse, or am I going to feel weirder? Or I don't know. So that's how I feel today. And also, I love you. Please write a review on iTunes. Thanks. Okay, I don't want to do this, honestly. I really don't want to do this because this whole episode is about an abusive relationship that I was in almost 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, roughly. So I don't want to have this conversation with you. I don't want to record this episode. I don't want to talk about this in therapy. I don't want to recount any of the details that I'm about to share with you. However, I guess that's what I fucking signed up for. I mean, I guess it's like I have to tell this part of the story to explain the next part of the story. So even though I don't want to talk about it, even though this doesn't interest me at all, I do feel like it's essential, So here goes. Let's talk about my fucking penchant for abusive relationships. This is so fun. This isn't weird at all. I don't even feel awkward a little bit, and I'm not feeling exposed or insecure or nervous or even weird. So how did this all start? I mean, how does anyone really get into an abusive relationship? Like, how do you find yourself in a situation like that? If you're smart and conscious and funny and cool, how the fuck do you end up in an abusive relationship? I didn't even know that that's what I was in until years after it happened. And then I had to look back on everything, and I had to get into another abusive relationship where I was like, oh, that's a pattern that's pretty unhealthy. That's probably sick and really rooted in some deep, deep generational trauma. So here's my deep generational trauma. My mother was physically abused by every single man that I ever saw in her life. So all the way back to my father, all the way back to her father, all the way back to her fucking prom night. So I grew up with a woman who only engaged in abusive relationships because when she was a kid, her dad used to beat the shit out of her. He was an abusive alcoholic, and it got to the point when she was 8 or 9 years old, he would walk into a room and she would literally wet herself because she was so terrified of what he was going to do. He smashed her head into one of those towel holders in a bathroom so hard that my mom was partially permanently deaf for her entire life. So she was abused by her father, and then she went out with some guy on prom and apparently got date raped. I don't know. I've heard this story a couple of different times, a couple of different ways, and I can't really tell you what happened on that night, but I know that it scarred her for life, and I know that she ran away to California afterwards, and I know that she met my dad, and then I know that they had an abusive relationship. One of my first memories is of my parents fighting in our beach house and my mom throwing video cassettes at him. Remember VHSs? My memory of a VHS is my mom literally hurling it across the foyer in our house at my dad. And I also have another early memory of my parents toasting champagne glasses, and my dad must have said something rude or cheeky or inappropriate, and my mom threw the champagne in his face. Those are my honestly first memories of my parents together, before shit got really crazy. Like, that was what my normal home life was. My mom's second husband, you know, didn't like beat her repeatedly or intensely, but I have a vivid memory of being 6 years old on a boat in New Zealand with her. And in the middle of the night, they're fighting, and I'm sitting on the stairs and I watch him slap her across the face, like open palmed, like hard. I don't remember what she said, but I remember thinking, oh, okay, this guy's bad and this is a pattern. And like, do all men hit women? Like, that's what I thought growing up, do all men hit women? Is that a thing? And then my mom's boyfriend after that, her fucking bald Beverly Hills hairdresser, creep show, psychopath boyfriend who she dated for years and years and years, who got her into meth and who, is responsible a lot for like her downward spiral. He hit her. He hit her all the time. He put her in the hospital frequently. I remember when I was 15, my mom got pregnant and they got into a fight and he beat her up so bad that she lost the baby and she was in a coma for 3 days. Like those were my teenage years with my mom. And then my mom got remarried again, like much later when I was in college, and that guy beat her up so much that he ended up in jail. And then there was my mom's last boyfriend. My mom's last boyfriend was 4 years older than me. And they used to go to widespread panic shows together, and he was like a heroin addict. And their relationship was just as terrible, just as abusive, just as awful as every other relationship that she was in. He ended up in jail. She ended up dead alone in her car. So that's my family history. Is that too much? Did I just overshare with you guys? Do you sick of knowing every single detail about my life? I mean, too bad. Find another podcast. But at the end of the day, it's really fucked up for me to say this, I guess, but I don't entirely think that my mom was the victim. I don't think that she was totally blameless in all of these situations. I think her biggest problem was that when she found herself in abusive situations, that she would stay. She would stay and she would almost like ask for more. My mom was super antagonistic and the meth made her crazy, like psycho crazy, broke down parts of her brain that she needed to function like a normal human being. And so she would get all high on meth or all high on crack, and she would get real angry and she'd get real jealous and she'd get real antagonistic and she would just yell things at people. I mean, she used to do this to me and I felt like I wanted to hit her sometimes just because I'm like, what are you talking about? You're insane. None of this is real. And you're like in my face. I need you to get away from me. So I didn't always have this compassionate lens of what she went through. And I think now that my mom's dead and now that I've been in 2 abusive relationships, I can kind of look back and be like, whoa, dude, I mean, you had some healing to do and like that's fucked up. And I'm sorry that you've always felt like you never deserved more. And so I'm saying that to her, my mother, but I'm also sort of like saying that to me in a weird way. It's like, I hope that this is something that I can learn how to heal from eventually and not find myself in situations where I feel like I have to stay and I don't feel like I deserve more. So I feel trapped. I never got into the kind of abusive relationships where someone was hitting me because I thought, oh, that's my line. If someone hits me, then I'm gone. So it's like instead, because I'm, not okay, I found a bunch of different ways to get abused by the relationships that I found myself in. And let's get into that, what I'm realizing and what I've been realizing as I've spent the last week thinking about this episode and thinking about what I wanted to talk about and how I was going to sort of remember and tell this story is that, that it wasn't my first abusive relationship and it wasn't my last. So this is kind of the middle. It was I had sort of a baseline for the kind of abuse that I would accept because I just was lonely and sad. And so I needed to have someone in my life that sort of replaced that love and affection that you would get from a parent. So I would use my romantic relationships to sort of supplement those feelings. When that British trollop found out about everything that was going on with the guy that she thought that she was in love with, the way that she responded, the healthy way, the sane and normal way to respond to finding out that your lover is a complete lying narcissist psychopath is that you say, bye, boy, So she found out about what happened and she was like, okay, see ya. And then she ended up writing an article that's online that's called That Time I Dated the Devil. and and she like made her peace and moved on. But I didn't do that. When I found out about everything, I just endured and thought, maybe it'll get better, or I thought I can't leave him because I love him, or I thought this is okay, or like this isn't that bad. You just tell yourself crazy things when you're in fucked up situations so you can get through it. It's like very classic trauma mentality. But what did my abuse look like is, I guess, when I'm trying to get that, like, what did my particular abusive relationships turn out to be? So basically, it started with I paid for everything. And I think that as a girl, like, that probably sounds like kind of, like, whatever, like that's not really abuse, you know what I mean? But I think that when you're in a relationship and you are constantly expected to cover the tab for two people, regardless of their situation, and when you get to a point where that expectation just becomes the standard and there is no conversation about it and there is less and less appreciation as time goes by, like, that eventually turns into like an abusive dynamic. So how did it start? I mean, I paid for everything. I paid for everything. And then we were also constantly having really rough, violent, and dangerous sex. Like, it was dangerous of us to have so many partners. It was dangerous of us to drink each other's blood when he was having, unprotected homosexual sex. It was dangerous for us to have unprotected sex in general, just because he was also acting really risky. So we were having all of this really dangerous sex, and I was paying for everything, and he was constantly lying to me. It was like a weird, psychotic sort of lying. He would say that he had a sandwich for lunch when he had pho. He would say that he was here when he was there. He would say that he talked to this person when he was talking to that person. There was never any element of reality or truth. And I think that when lying becomes your existence, when lying becomes your go-to, it's then you don't know how to not lie anymore. You don't even know how to tell the truth, even about completely innocuous, seemingly, unimportant things. So I was paying for everything. We were having really dangerous sex. He was constantly lying to me. And we were both using drugs really heavily. So I think that that was also a part of it, is that I was paying for this drug addict to live with me for free and have wild sex. Like, that sounds like a sweet deal for someone else, but not if you're the one footing the bill. Cocaine is expensive. And our weed habit was intense. So imagine like two people going through an ounce like every 4 days. Like, that's a lot of weed, That's a lot of money. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked, I paid all the bills, I planned all our adventures, I paid for all of our travel. I mean, I planned all of our travel. So everything that we did together, every outing that we had, it was just really a one-person relationship. And he was just kind of there, and I just thought, because he was like, what? Because he was hot, because his dick was big, because he was funny, because like I loved him, like that's enough to just have someone be there, when they're not contributing anything to the relationship, and if anything, they're sort of like bringing you down. But when you have this like abusive mentality where you think that like, yeah, this is what I deserve, or like, yeah, this is normal, or like, yeah, I'm okay with this. Like, I'm okay with this. I'm so okay with this. I sound really okay, right? Because I'm just so fine this whole time, except I was spiraling downward into, a destruction that I never even knew. I thought that I had already hit my rock bottom so many times at this point. I thought that I had fucked up as much as I could. I thought that I had actually gained some stability. I had a live-in boyfriend. I had a nice apartment. I had tons of money and drugs and a job that I did. I didn't love it, but I did it and I made enough to live off of and support two people. So it was like, I've got all those things, all of those normal things, all of those markers that say like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's good. This is normal, except underneath it all, I'm in an abusive relationship that I cannot get out of. I really, really couldn't leave him at all. Even though I think after the whole British invasion, I wanted to. I feel like I fell out of love with him, but I couldn't even accept that or couldn't even realize it at that point. During this time, I lost a lot of really important things too. So it was like I was gaining all of this negativity in my life and I was being drained in every way that you can imagine. And I was also losing the best parts of me. So my friend Hannah, I've talked about her numerous times, but this was like one of the hardest parts of our friendship. She came to visit me and I had been lying to her for months that this dude and I were living together. And she came to town and I picked her up from the airport and we were going to go back to my place, except now I had to explain to her that he was there. And if she wanted to go there with me, that she'd have to see him. And she hated him. She had known him from college and, had known all of like the, infidelity and the manipulation and all of the lying. And so she just couldn't figure out why I would be with someone like that. So I finally tell Hannah and we're in the car and we're driving and we have the worst fight that we've ever had as friends. I mean, I've fucking been to jail. I have been through every terrible thing that you could put like a friend through. And this is the thing that causes us to have like a blowout, like, fuck you, like fight. So this is my best friend. And she's just telling me that she can't be close to me anymore if I'm going to have this other person in my life. And I couldn't hear that. I couldn't hear that she was coming from a good place. That's what you do with your friends when you're like, hey, you're in an abusive relationship and I think you should leave. But I couldn't hear that. So I was just like, well, fuck you then. You're the problem, like a spoiled little brat, So Hannah and I end up not hanging out. And that sort of caused a huge rift in our friendship that we didn't see each other or speak very much for the better part of a year. The next time I saw Hannah after this trip, she came to visit me in the hospital after I jumped off a fucking building, So it was really hard. And I remember throughout that whole year, I would randomly at times just like look at him and yell like with such anger, be like, I miss Hannah. And I felt like it was his fault, even though really it was mine because I was the one who was choosing to stay. I was the one who was in the abusive relationship. We would fight all the time and there were so many opportunities and so many times where our fights would often lead to me being like, get the fuck out. And he'd be like, okay, I'm going to leave. And then I would do my like, no, don't go. Cause that's how I am. And that's really fun. And we'll get into that later. But I also lost someone else at this point in my life that's this one hurts because like I still don't have her back and I don't think I ever will. This relationship really ruined another relationship in my life that is probably the most important relationship I've ever had with anyone. She's my family. I mean, sort of. She's my cousin, sort of. I mean, she's my step cousin, but we grew up together and we were best friends forever. And she has kind of repeated a lot of the same patterns that I have. She got pregnant when she was really young and she got married when she was even younger. And she ended up having 2 kids and having a totally different life than I had. And even though we had grown up together and, we're in the same family, our lives were very, very different. So the thing we had in common is that we both really liked abusive relationships, like different kinds of abuse, but abusive nonetheless. So she got out of an abusive relationship and then I got into one. And it was a weird transition where maybe for the first time in the last decade of our life together, she was single and I was, like living with someone. So it was a difficult transition and she hated him and he didn't care for her very much either. So it was like my two best friends, the two closest people to me in the whole world, like my closest family member, my best cousin friend, and then my best actual friend in life, Hannah, were both like, this relationship is so bad, we can't be in your life anymore. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. Fuck you guys. But I mean, fuck me, really, because it really made it a lot easier to jump off a building at the end of this story is what I'm trying to tell you, is that all of this stuff was sort of a build up. It was a response to trauma. It was like my whole life had just been sort of puddle jumping from one point to the next and never really being settled and always sort of having this kind of crazy, manic, wild, unhinged. Do I sound unhinged lately, by the way? I don't get like edited like I used to. My old producer used to do a lot of like editing and fighting and coaching, and he had a lot of ideas of how I was supposed to be on here. And my new producer, shout out People of Comedy Network, James Webb's the best, it's different, like now I'm just sitting here and I'm really, I'm going off on you guys. So do I sound unhinged? Because I feel like I'm doing great. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a little unhinged, but I was in this abusive relationship and I couldn't leave, and there's more to it. So I don't know how to like talk about this without giving you as few details as possible, because I realize this is like a very gauche conversation, but like, let's talk about the money for a second, because this is going to come up later, but I feel like I have to at least like touch on it now so that you understand why there was so much betrayal, and how I think that from the outside looking in, you could look at my life and think like, what the fuck is wrong with this spoiled little rich girl that she can't just fucking get her shit together? I realize that I like make a lot of you guys mad sometimes when I'm just being honest with you and telling you, what the deal is. But so here's the deal with the money, is that my grandparents started a software company in 1982, and they worked very hard and cheated a lot of I cheated a lot of people out of money. No, I'm just kidding. Not like officially cheated, but like organized crime, like legally cheated people out of money. They invented a bunch of proprietary software that they ended up selling to Chase and American Express. And so they started their company in 1982 and they sold their company in 2012. And they sold their company, and there's some kind of weird inheritance tax that was enacted by Obama, where if you leave like money to your family, 51% of it gets taken away. So, to the government in taxes. So to avoid that tax, my grandparents ended up splitting the sale of their company over a trust for our entire family. So my mom is one of 8/secretly 10. And I have 27 first cousins right now. And that's a lot of people. So everyone got a pretty large inheritance that was, consisted of money, stocks, bonds, a bunch of other like broad spectrum things. But what ended up happening for me is that I, all of a sudden, getting out of jail, getting, my life back together, now I have this opportunity where I'm getting like a huge chunk of money, and my family is like, okay, like this is for your life. This is for your future. This is how you're supposed to like make your money. It's like, take this money, make more money. So during this time of living with this guy that I was in an abusive relationship with, I end up receiving a huge chunk of money. And if you don't think that had anything to do with him staying with me, you're dumb, because that was probably his like main, if not primary motivation. And I even had him on recording saying that that's what he was doing. But that's how abuse works. It's like, you can hear it, you can see it, it's right in front of you. You know it's wrong, you know it's bad, but you can't get out. I mean, how do you get out? Like, how do you get out in an abusive relationship? How did I get out? I jumped off a fucking building, So it's like, I don't know how to get out. But I mean, But I mean, like, good luck figuring that out. You know, if you have any tips or tricks, please reach out to me. Let me know. So I get all this money, and him and I are making all these plans, and we used to watch a lot of HGTV together because obviously he's like gay and I'm like into it. But we'd watch HGTV and we would plan that we were going to buy all of these homes internationally, and then we were going to fix them up, and then we were going to turn them into income properties, and we were just going to travel and sort of like have a perma honeymoon type of life, you know? So during this time where I'm living with this guy and I'm in this abusive relationship, we get engaged. We get engaged, and I'm like, yeah, this is a good idea. Like, this is the person I want to be with. He had an emotional affair with a British girl while he was living with me, and I was paying all of his bills, and he said he was using me for money. But I think, yes, let's get married so you can have half of everything that's mine, because obviously I'm so smart and I know exactly what I'm doing. So, so we get engaged, we're living together, we have all of these plans, and deep down, I'm just dying. I'm so miserable. I really started to resent him, and I really started to hate our life together, and it started to show, you know? I think that this is probably the hardest thing for me to say out loud because it's true, but I don't want to acknowledge it. But the truth is, I started acting like my mother, you know? I really started to like fall into that role. I started picking fights. I started being antagonistic. I started screaming. We were fucking nightmares to have as neighbors because all we would do is like scream at each other and play house music and have really loud sex. It's like, I'm so sorry for Joel, Scott, and Brock who like lived above us and had to deal with all that. But you know, fuck, I don't know. Like, I don't even know what to say. I'm embarrassed. I feel stupid. I'm like uncomfortable that I was in this situation, and that wasn't even the last time I was in a situation like this. It was, you know, one of the last times, I hope, but I even have like another story much later, several years down the line, that almost mimics this to a T, you know? So I was in a fucked up relationship and I couldn't get out, and I got a bunch of money and we got engaged, and I was like, yeah. I'm like, I want to leave. I want to get away from you. And I thought that every day, probably a little bit. And I knew that it was really over when I started like sleeping with other people. So I don't know if he even knows about this, but there was a time towards the last, like, I want to say like 3 months that we lived together, where I was just having sex with women behind his back. And I know that would have like maybe sounds like, oh, it like turn him on or something, but I feel like he probably would have been mad that I was like doing stuff behind his back without him. And that was how it was. It was like a lot of double standards because he would constantly lie to me, and then I felt like, oh, I guess I have to like lie to him. But if he had found out that I was lying, he would have been really upset. So you know, after the British girl, after the STDs, after all the lies, after losing all of my friends, after my stepmom died, and I just felt so alone, and I felt so trapped, and I really thought that that was where I wanted to be, except I really knew that wasn't where I wanted to be, and I really, really couldn't get out of that situation. So it's just like a descent into madness and fear, and that's probably the worst place you can find yourself in. I think that's how people kill themselves. That's how people jump off buildings. That's how people like develop really strong, debilitating drug addictions, because you don't know where else to turn. And when you feel trapped, you just implode. So the next episode is going to be about me imploding, which I think will be really fun and cool, and also very relaxing and easy to talk about. And I'm actually not going to dread this at all for like the next week or anything even remotely close to that. What else do I have to say? I love you. I really love all the messages that you guys send me. I know I haven't been doing any like shout outs and stuff, but I see them, I get them, I'm writing back, and write a goddamn iTunes review for the love of this podcast. Okay, I love you. Bye.